So we developed the early years evaluation maybe a little over 10 years ago in response to a call from the World Bank. And they wanted a tool to measure children's skills before they entered school in India, Jordan, and Dominican Republic. And they really wanted it as a way to assess the effects of various early childhood interventions. It eventually evolved because the Canadian government said, well, we need something that we can use here in both French and English, and so we developed the early years evaluation. So we worked a lot to get a reliable tool, and the process it's a long process. You have to start with a lot of different items, because if you think of something like language development, there's maybe 1,000 different skills you could ask about. So we wanted skills that covered a broad range of kind of important markers of skills. And so you go out and you do some pilot studies and you see how the items are performed. We have these techniques called item response theory to look at which questions are good ones, which ones are not. And eventually the goal is to distill it down into a nice assessment. We have a teacher assessment version where teachers observe children for a period of about 6 weeks, and then they rate the children's skills in these 5 domains. And the 5 domains are well accepted by UNESCO and generally by early childhood educators. And then we also have a direct assessment where an assessor will sit down with the child and go through a battery of things measuring the skills in those domains. We found kids love doing the assessments, the direct assessment, and teachers find it useful. Once they get it and they get the data and they see how it can be used in the classroom to manage first of all, find out which kids are most vulnerable and need extra support, but also be able to say, well, gee, in my class, I really need to strengthen some of the cognitive skills. And so we've got a number of activities that teachers can do to help strengthen kids' skills in those domains. There's a few things that are unique about our early years evaluation. One is that we assess children right at the beginning of the year, whereas a lot of the assessments are always at the end of the year. We start right at the beginning of the year, and we call it a leading indicator rather than a trailing indicator. So you have a leading indicator, and you say, okay, here's where we need to focus our efforts. Here are some children who are vulnerable. And then at the end of the school year, we test children who were basically vulnerable on the first assessment. So in Canada, we might have 70% of children who are doing just fine. Then there's the next group down that have what we call Tier 2 learning needs. And we know that those children need about an extra 3 hours of augmentative instruction, something in addition to what they're getting in the regular classroom, usually in groups of 2 or 3 children. Then you've got children who have Tier 3 learning needs, and those children need about an extra hour every day, and usually one-on-one to get them onto tracks. So one of the unique features of the early years evaluation is when we do the assessment, we can identify very well which kids have only Tier 1 learning needs, which kids have Tier 2 learning needs, and Tier 3 learning needs. And we can assess with a fair degree of accuracy which kids are going to need extra support right from the get-go. So when you think about teachers, you really want it to inform their classroom practice. And so we do a lot of interviews with teachers, say what helps and what doesn't help and so on. Because at the end of the day, if it's not useful for teachers, the whole thing's not going to work. But then you go up to the principals level, and the principals like the data. Why? Because it helps them give them a better, more fair, more equal allocation of students across their classes. And what principals have said is that by knowing the children's skills right at the beginning of the year, we can plan for them better, and we can have the parents in and have that crucial conversation about, this child's going to need some extra support. Otherwise, they end up going all the way through till December or January, and then when things aren't going well, then you have more of a confrontational meeting with parents. But so getting that off on the right foot, that's for principals. And then you go up to the superintendent, the district level, and we produce maps on for each of where the schools are, and what percentage of kids are vulnerable and so on. We all do all kinds of different maps, but those are used by the district mainly for resource allocation. So one of the things we're quite proud of is we just completed our first national evaluation for our entire country, and that's the country of Uruguay. So we started 4 years ago, and we assessed the children in one department, and we did all the psychometric analyses because we had translated the tool into Spanish and made sure it was working well. And in addition, when you go into a new country, you need to contextualize the instrument. So we did a lot of interviews with teachers and had a lot of feedback from people at the ministry and the Evaluation Institute about how to make the tool better. We've collected data now for the whole country, so I think we've assessed 98% of the children in the country. That's really exciting because the country can now say, here's where we are, here's what the skills are in 2017, and now how can we bring up those level of skills through different kinds of activities that teachers can do in the classroom.